Hello and welcome students that are taking Math for Business and Finance and Math Applications. This here is going to be a theory video for Chapter 4, and it's going to cover bank reconciliations as an overview. Again, this here is going to be all theory. We're not going to do any problems. Now, when I post this up to the business group under the Math for Business Application section, you will also see 3 other videos that are labeled Bank Reconciliation 1, 2, and 3. Those videos will show an actual reconciliation using the forms, using data, and showing how a reconciliation is done on paper. However, as I said, this particular video is pretty much going to be a theory, the idea behind it, and there's no special way I'm going to go about this other than just to talk about the process and what it actually means and what actually happens. So you watch this video, then watch the next 3 bank reconciliation videos on how to actually do it, and then of course do the word problems and the summary practice test in order to um, have practice at doing the bank reconciliations, because it's most likely that this is something, obviously it's a whole chapter on reconciliation, so you're going to have it on a test. So become familiar with it and become understand what you're doing and why you're doing it. All right, so let's talk about the theory. Let me get to a new slide here. Okay, new slide. Here's my pen, and all right, the way this works, this is you. Okay, and let's say you receive a paycheck from your employer. So you have, I'm just going to make something up here. Say you have $400 in your hands, in your pocket right now. Okay, now that's probably in the form of a check. Okay, and if not, then it most likely was an ETF transfer to your bank. So this here is your bank. Okay. It doesn't matter whether it's a check in your hands or it's in the bank, but we're going, for the intents and purposes, in order to be able to understand from beginning to end, let's assume that you don't have a checking account, or you don't do any banking whatsoever. So you received a check from your employer for $400. Now, obviously, you know you have $400, but it doesn't do you any good it being a check. So you're going to walk over here to your bank and to a bank, and you're going to create a checking account, right? Or a savings account. Most likely, it's going to be a savings account. They have a tendency to force you to put money into a savings account, and in order for you to be able to get a checking account. But in either way, let's just talk in terms of the checking account itself. Okay, so you come over to the bank, and let's today I'm making this video. It's on March 3rd. Okay, so on March 3rd, you create an account at the bank and you deposit the $400 into the bank. Okay, now here's the thing. You took the money out of your hands and you stuck it over here into the bank. Okay, so really, unless you write it down on a piece of paper, you have nothing other than a receipt that you get from the bank showing that you put the $400 into their bank. Now, the bank itself is going to keep a record of all of the transactions that occur in the bank, in your particular checking account. So it kind of behooves you to do the same exact thing, right? And you do that same thing using what's called a check register. And the reason why you want to you keep a check register is because you want to know what you're doing. Money's going in and out of your checking account. So on March 3rd, when you walked over and you put the money in, um, you know, the bank is showing the same exact thing that you're saying should be in the bank, $400. Okay. So for you, when you write it in the check register, you're going to write, a deposit of $400. Okay. Let's say time goes on a little bit. Okay. And for, obviously you you need cash. Having nothing in your hands doesn't help you go to the grocery store and buy groceries if you don't have any money. I mean, yes, you can go and write a check, and we'll talk about that in a little bit. Or you can use a debit card that you set up or whatever have you when you go to the grocery store. But let's just say, today is now say 3/7, and you decide that you need some cash. All right, so you're going to write a check, and then let's call it check number 100, and you're going to write it for, say, $100. Okay, so when you come over to the bank and you give the bank the check, the bank is going to say, okay, check number 100 was for $100. Okay, and the difference in your account, now the balance in your account, all right, so this is going to be our balance, is going to be $300 left. Okay, and that's what you're showing in your checkbook yet, in your check register yet, 400 less the 100. Okay, and all is fine. Okay. Now, let's say that yes, you do go over to the grocery store. Okay, and let's make a little grocery store down here, and you go over to the grocery store, and now you have you had gotten a debit card from the bank, and in the grocery store you spend $50 on that debit card. All right, the debit card is different from a credit card, by the way. A debit card accesses the money directly from your checking account. A credit card goes through a different bank, all right, a third-party bank, which then takes the money from your credit account. But I don't want your checking account. But I don't want to get into a lot of detail. Let's just keep it simple here by using the debit card. So you go over to the grocery store, you buy $50 of groceries on your debit card. Okay, so immediately when you use that card, and let's say this happens on 3/15. Okay, immediately when you do that, okay, because it's electronic, right? It accesses your bank account, your checking account immediately. So you end up, the bank is showing that another transaction for $50 went through, so you have a balance of $250. And of course, you should write that in your check register, okay? So now in your check register, your balance should show $250 also. Right? Let's say then that you're going to pay a bill. And let's say you're going to pay the electric company up here. And let's say the bill is for, I don't know, say $125, all right? So it now is, let's call this, say, the 29th of the month. And you're going to write a check number 111, for $125, okay? And you're going to put it in an envelope, take it to the post office, and mail it to the electric company, right? So the electric company will get that check for the $125. Now, here's the thing. You write that into your check register, okay? So your balance as of this moment in time ends up being $125, right? 400 deposit, less 100, that's 300, less 50 for the groceries, that's 250, less the $125 for the check going to the electric company. So the balance in your account is $125 right at this moment in time. But notice what happens. You did this on 3/29, okay? And in March, there happens to be 31 days. Okay, so when you stick that in the mail, and I mean, you write the check on the 29th, so maybe, you drive by the post office the next day, so you drop it in the mail actually on the 30th. Okay, now, by the time it gets to the electric company, let's say it takes another day or two, let's say the electric company actually receives it on 4/2, on April 2nd. Okay, now notice what happens here. Your bank is saying that you only have a balance of 250 as of 3/31, the last day in the month. Okay, you're saying in your check register that you only have, $125. And the reason why that is because this here check for the 125 has not gone through your checking account just yet. And that's why we do bank reconciliations. What we're looking to do is we're looking to say, okay, here's what the bank thinks, okay, and here's what we think should be in that account, okay, and any difference between the two is what we're going to reconcile, meaning on 3/31, the bank is going to mail you a statement, or it's going to be available online. And what you're going to do is you're going to look at that bank statement and say, okay, what is on the bank statement that is not, what is not on the bank statement that is in my check register, okay? So when we look at this, it's obvious that this here check, check number 111, okay, has not made it to the bank yet. Okay? So we have to take that into account. Conversely, let's say the bank also says that we're going to take, at the end of every month, we're going to take a bank charge of, say, $5. Okay, so the bank is really saying you have $245 as your balance in your account on 3/31. Right? Well, notice that on the bank statement there's the $5 charge, but you don't have that in your check register. Okay, so what we're doing here is we're saying, okay, whatever is not in our check register, right? Whatever is in our check register, come on, ink pen, that is not on the bank statement, we need to put on the bank statement. So we're going to have to write in that check number 111 for $125, okay? And that means we're saying that the balance in that account should be $120, okay? And conversely, we need to take whatever is in the bank, whatever's on the bank statement that is not in our check register, we have to put it in our check register. So we're going to see that service charge of $5, right, on 3/31, and we're going to adjust our balance to $120 here, okay, with the idea being that when we account for those differences between the bank and your check register, that balance, the 120 and this 120, they should be the same. If they're not, there's a mistake somewhere and it needs to be found. Okay, and it could just be something as simple as the bank, and maybe the teller, when they received, let's say this here, this check here was to the electric company, and now this is just an example, okay, as to some things that you might find. Let's say that the check was supposed to be for $125.32. Okay. Well, you're showing that check as $125.32, but maybe the teller enters it in as $125.23. Okay, so there's a difference between the two because of the cents, and it's not just a matter of finding what's on one and not on the other, but it's also making sure that whatever the amounts are, that they're correct. So in this particular case here, you're talking about having a 9-cent difference because you wrote the check for 32 cents and the bank is showing it as 23 cents. So that's like a 9 cents in your favor. So you need to record that 9 cents in your check register, because that's an error based upon what you put into your check register. Okay, and so that's kind of like the whole idea behind this. However, let me go to a new slide here, and I just want to give you a real world example of kind of like what was happening. Right, one day I went into my bank, okay, and I'm at the teller, right, and I'm standing there at the teller, and I'm transacting my business. And a couple of tellers over, there was a young woman there, okay, and that young woman was having an argument with the teller, okay, and the argument was that she said that just yesterday, and this happened to be at the very end of the month, okay, that the young woman went to the ATM machine at the bank. And when she punched in the balance, and I'm going to make up some numbers here, when she punched in the balance, right, the balance was, let's say, $175. Okay. So she thought, well, I need some cash here, so I want to take out $150, which means I should only, she should have a balance of $25 left in the account. So she's like wondering, how could my account be overdrawn? Now realize that when you're overdrawn and on the bank is going to charge you what's called a non-sufficient fund charge because you're overdrawn. Now here's the catch. The woman, she was writing checks, and she mailed the checks to whoever she needed to. And let's say she wrote check A, check B, and check C, right? And it doesn't matter what those amounts were, okay? It could have been, I'm just making stuff up here, it could have been like 35, 65, and I don't know, $75, something, doesn't really matter, okay? But the point being is that the bank itself, was saying, oh, you have $175 left in your checking account, right, as of the last day of the month, right? But what this woman failed to do was she failed to take into consideration that she had these three checks. Let's total those up, 13, 16, 17. She had these three checks that were outstanding. In other words, she put them in the mail for the amount of $175, okay? And those checks hadn't made it to the companies, and the companies hadn't taken the money out of her checking account. So in reality, instead of having a balance of $175, her balance, after all was said and done with those checks, should have been zero. Okay. Now that would have been fine if she hadn't gone and made a withdrawal of $150. But because she withdrew $150, now she was overdrawn. And what ended up happening is that for each check, the bank charged her $35. Now, she takes the money out, okay? And so the bank is saying, oh, you have only $25 left, okay? But reality is that when check A hit the bank for 35, okay, now she's short $10. So the bank charges her a non-sufficient fund, a charge of $35, which now makes her balance in her account minus 45. And here's the thing, the banks have a tendency to run them twice, meaning they'll put it in, if it bounces, they'll do it again, okay? Because of, transactions can occur, and maybe for whatever reason you deposited, say, $1,000, which covered everything, okay? So they have a tendency to run them twice. So there was an additional $35 charge, so now her balance is short $80. And that was just for check A, okay? Well, when check B comes along, and for 65, well, again, she's short, so the bank is going to charge 35, run it again, another 35, so that's $70 more that she's short, Okay, so now she's $150 short, and then check C comes along for 75, and that's short, right? So again, so now we're in her account, she's $220 short, and she still owes A, B, and C, the full $175. And she's in the bank and she's arguing with the teller saying, how could this be? I looked at the ATM machine, and in the ATM machine, when I looked, I had a balance of 175, so I took out 150. I should still have a balance of $25 left. But again, she did not take into consideration that she had written those checks. She just didn't think about it. She didn't know about it, most likely because she didn't have a check register, okay, and she did not record those transactions, okay. So the gist of this here is that you should have a check register, and it doesn't matter in today's day and age of electronic funds where you can actually go online and look at your checking account at any time that you want. One of my coworkers here, every day he looks at his checking account to see what's going in and what's going out, and that's fine. And he uses that as his check register, and he knows what he's doing. So he's doing a reconciliation basically every single day. Okay, me personally, I use Quicken. Okay, and I'm not endorsing Quicken. All right, but um, I use that as my check register in an electronic format. Okay, I used to use it in the paper copy, that you get with all of your checks when you order checks from the bank. I did it by hand doing that, but the point being is I had a check register, and because I have the check register with all of my transactions in, at the end of the month, the bank is going to send me a bank statement. And I'm going to have my check register, and I need to make sure that whatever is on my bank statement is in my check register, and whatever is in my check register is in my bank statement. And when I make sure of that, whatever that balance is in the bank statement, it should equal the balance in my check register, and I'm good to go. I understand what's in those accounts. I know how much money I actually have. Okay, so again, be aware that yeah, here's your bank and here's you. Okay, but realize that your transactions with the bank have delays at sometimes. Okay, and you have to account for those delays before they hit that bank statement. I mean, just as one more quick aside, let's say it's 3/31, last day of the month, and let's say it's Friday. Okay, now the bank will start closing out their books right around 3 o'clock. Okay, even though they might be open until 5. Okay? So if you go in sometime between 3 and 5, and let's say you make a deposit, okay, of $1,000, right? That deposit is not going to show up on your bank statement, even though you deposited it on 3/31, on the last day of the month. And the reason for that is because the bank has an early close. Okay, so yeah, the bank's statement is going to show that it has less than how much you actually think you should have in there because you deposited that extra $1,000, and you have to account for these differences. So when you're doing this, there's a lot of different differences. There's non-sufficient funds, check charges. In other words, maybe you pay per check, say maybe you pay 10 cents a check. There's check printing charges. If you have your checks printed up, it might cost you $15. It all depends upon the bank, okay, and whatever they're going to charge. Some banks will charge immediately a service charge, right? Maybe they charge, say, $5, at the end of every month just as a service charge, okay? It all depends upon the bank. So as you go through the exercises, be aware that different things can happen, and they're mostly the more common things that do happen. But when you're doing your own bank reconciliation, you're always going to be looking for, those idiosyncrasies, those things that are just slightly different, and make sure you account for them. Okay, so this has been a really long video, and it's been all theory, but watch bank reconciliation 1, 2, and 3 to see how 1 is actually done, and then be sure to do the assigned homework problems, because you will have this on a test, guaranteed. All right, till then.